I'm back to share with you my ultimate vegan bacon recipe. This was another tried and tested recipe for me commercially, and now you're about to learn the specific method I use to obtain a rich colour that's perfect every single time. The two key ingredients that make this recipe so special are fresh beetroot and ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C. It is important to use beetroot with the stalks and tails intact, as we want to retain as much of the colour pigment as possible when cooking them. You can find a list of the ingredients and equipment recommended in the description below. We will start by pressure cooking the intact beetroot. For medium-sized beetroot, I recommend cooking them for 15 minutes, then allow a natural pressure release for 10 to 15 minutes. They come out very hot, so it's worth leaving them to stand for a further 10 to 15 minutes. Do not skip this step unless you want to burn your fingers like I just did. Ouch! They just need to be warm enough for the skin to easily peel off. Cut away the tails and stalks before chopping into slices and leaving in a bowl covered with cling film until we need them. This recipe is split into two doughs, a white and a red dough. We will make the white dough first to avoid contaminating it with any colour pigment from the beetroot and the red dough. I'm using a smaller processor to make our white wet mix to ensure everything is blended smoothly. I've mixed together the water, apple cider vinegar, miso paste, smoked salt and white pepper, which I'm adding first. Then add the tofu and blend until smooth. Add the wet mix to the Vital gluten, then begin to bring the mixture together until it forms a soft dough. You may notice tiny specks of tofu in the dough. This is completely fine and won't be noticeable at all. Add the dough to your food processor and begin to process it in 1-minute bursts to protect your processor. I processed this dough in 3 1-minute bursts. You're looking for a stretchy, malleable, smooth dough that will later be stretched to cover the top of the red dough to produce our fat. Cover in a bowl with cling film and leave to the side. After washing out our food processor, we will now move on to the red meat dough. The wet mixture for this dough is of a big enough volume to use my bigger food processor. Add the beetroot. Next, I've combined and am adding the water, liquid smoke, miso paste, vegetable oil, mustard and apple cider vinegar. Add the onion powder, brown sugar, smoked salt, garlic powder, and finally the white pepper. Blend for at least a few minutes until perfectly smooth. The next ingredient is the magic ingredient that will allow you to retain all of that wonderful beetroot colour pigment. You only need a teeny tiny amount per kilogram, and this recipe is just over half of that. Ascorbic acid heavily reduces the oxidization process, which is what usually turns brilliant purples and reds brown when cooked or exposed to oxygen. You don't need any more than about 1/8 of a teaspoon, if that. Combine the cornstarch and Vital Wheat gluten loosely before adding it to the food processor. Slowly start to pulse until the whole mix is combined into a soft, loose dough, as shown. We will be processing the red dough in 2 batches so the food processor doesn't overheat. So split the dough in 2 and place 1/2 back in the food processor. This recipe will require up to 4 or 5 1-minute bursts in the food processor for each half of the red dough. Make sure to allow a 30 to 60 second rest period between each burst. The dough should be just about starting to wrap around the blade once it's done. This may vary depending on the power of your food processor, so make sure to pay attention for the first half. Much like the white dough, the red dough should be stretchy, malleable and smooth when done. Place the first half back in the covered bowl and repeat with the second half. Once finished, remove and give the processed dough an obligatory wangle before combining both halves. To aid in developing nice meaty fibres, stretch the combined red dough out and fold and twist in on itself multiple times before tucking it neatly into a smooth and satisfying ball as shown. Leave the dough in a bowl covered with cling film whilst we prepare the foil for wrapping the bacon log. Lay out 2 sheets of foil roughly 50 to 60 centimeters in length. Then begin to shape your bacon log. There is no science here, just shape it into a rough rectangle to the desired thickness. Next, take out the white dough and decide whether you'd like multiple streaks or not, and divide as appropriate. I'm going for 1 streak this time, so I'm going to split it in 2 and stretch out one piece over the top of the red dough. Try to tuck the white dough over the sides and press firmly down to ensure it adheres to the red dough so it doesn't separate when cooked. Place the log central to the foil and begin to semi-loosely wrap the dough in the first sheet. Ensuring the end of the foil sits on top of the dough. Flatten the excess foil on each side as we will be creating somewhat of an airtight seal. Fold in the sides as shown, pinching in the corners as you go. The pinching is just so you don't leave any sharp edges in case you cook multiple at once and pierce the other as it expands. You are looking to leave about a finger's width gap either side to allow for slight expansion. Seitan naturally expands as it cooks, so we need to give it some room to breathe. Any less and the parcel could burst open. Any more and you won't get a nice dense finish. Seitan contracts again as it cools, so if it expands too far during the cooking process, you can end up with too much air, affecting the density. Repeat the exact process again and then we are ready to get it cooking. We will be using a pressure cooker, but you could steam it instead. I'd recommend maybe 1 hour and 35 minutes of steaming. Add 1 cup of water to your pressure cooker, then make sure the foil gap is pointing downwards when you add it to the pressure cooker. This is to ensure liquid doesn't start to collect inside the parcel before it expands and becomes airtight. Cook the parcel on high pressure for 1 hour and 10 minutes, and make sure to let the pressure release naturally for 15 minutes so it doesn't burst when taking the lid off. Allow the parcel to stand for an hour on a rack, or alternatively, you can place it in cold water with an ice pack to cool down quicker. Be as patient as you can and let this baby rest overnight before opening. Once rested, it's time to get slicing. Look at how wonderfully the beetroot colour has been retained by the antioxidant effects of the ascorbic acid. I'm using a meat slicer to slice the bacon, but you can use a nice sharp knife if you don't have one. I've left a link to the meat slicer I use in the description below. This recipe is very easy to make once you get the hang of it, and it is very healthy as it contains nearly 25% beetroot instead of food colouring and other additives you would find in shop-bought vegan bacon. Not only that, but it is very cheap to make in comparison as well, and you could always batch cook, slice and freeze in portions for up to 3 months. The very last step is to get those slices in the frying pan. Depending on the thickness of your slices, they need no more than 1 to 1.5 minutes each side. Otherwise they may go tough. You could even brush them with a little maple syrup to get that maple glaze going. Serve up on a bed of lettuce and tomato for a delicious, smoky, meaty and oh so bacony vegan BLT, good enough to impress vegans and meat eaters alike. I hope you enjoyed this recipe video. I would greatly appreciate it if you could like, subscribe and leave a comment below, let me know your thoughts. Until next time.